So we're working on our LEQ, how does a reader differentiate between the different sentence structures? And so far we've talked about subjects and verbs, which I said must exist in order for the sentence to exist. The trickier part is that sometimes sentences have more than one subject and more than one verb. When we have a subject and a verb, we pair those together, and those are called clauses. So again, a clause is a pair of a subject and a verb. The number of clauses that a sentence has, in addition to the type of clauses that a sentence has, will determine its structure. So to get started talking about clauses, first of all, there are two types. There are independent clauses that can stand alone, like this lovely Santa Claus over here on the left, or there are dependent clauses. They need to stand alongside other clauses in order to make sense and in order to make a complete sentence, like all of these Santas clumped up over here on the right are. So an independent clause is a group of words that's going to contain a subject and a verb. That's our pair of subject and verb, and it's going to express a complete thought. Since it is a subject, it has a subject, it has a verb, and it expresses a complete thought. Those are our three qualifications for a sentence. An independent clause, therefore, can serve as a sentence all by itself. Here are some examples of independent clauses. You'll notice that I have the subjects in red and the verbs in blue. Confidence is a great thing to have. The English class comes into class quietly. Howard Wildcats are the best. Beyonce married Jay-Z. They were freshmen last year. Now, none of these sentences are very long and detailed. However, they all have a subject, a verb, and they express a complete thought. So they are an independent clause that functions as a sentence. Dependent clauses, however, cannot function as a complete sentence. They cannot stand alone. That's because they have a subordinating conjunction that attaches itself to the clause and forces it to be dependent on other information. That subordinating conjunction prevents the dependent clause from being a complete thought all on its own. Here are some common subordinating conjunctions. The list is longer than this, but these are some of the subordinating conjunctions that we see most often. So now what I've done is I've taken those independent clauses that we saw earlier, and I've simply added one of those subordinating conjunctions to the front, and now we see what once was an independent clause that can function as a sentence on its own now depends on more information to be a complete thought. These can no longer be sentences by themselves. While confidence is a great thing to have, since English class comes into class early, because Howard Wildcats are the best, when Beyonce married Jay-Z, even though they were freshmen last year, you'll notice that each of these dependent clauses are leaving questions unanswered. When Beyonce married Jay-Z, what happened? The dependent clause by itself does not tell us. We need an independent clause to partner up with a dependent clause in order to have a complete thought. So here's those dependent clauses again. When Beyonce married Jay-Z, Mr. Totoro cried for days. Now the thought is complete. When Beyonce married Jay-Z, photographers were not allowed inside. Again, that independent clause, when partnered up with the dependent clause, we have a complete thought. Here's a trick for telling the difference between an independent clause and a dependent clause. If you can put the phrase, "Can you believe that?" in front of a clause and it makes sense, then you know that that clause is an independent clause. If it doesn't make sense, it's a dependent clause. So here are some examples. Can you believe that Beyonce married Jay-Z? That question makes sense, so I know that the clause Beyonce married Jay-Z is an independent clause. However, can you believe that when Beyonce married Jay-Z, that one doesn't make sense. So I know that the clause when Beyonce married Jay-Z is a dependent clause. So what you'll do now is you will go through and you will identify which of the clauses here is the either dependent or independent clause. Notice that I am asking for different identifications each time. Pause the video now, go through the practice on your own. Once you have finished the practice, resume the video. Alright, so I'm trying to determine here which one is the dependent clause, meaning which one depends on more information to be a complete thought. And the answer here is when she performed on the VMAs. That by itself cannot be a sentence. If we do the test, can you believe that when she performed on the VMAs, we still want more information. It doesn't pass the can you believe that test, so that one is the dependent clause. With this one, whenever she's nervous, she bites her nails. I need the dependent clause. That is whenever she's nervous. That one does not express a complete thought. It needs additional information. Now I'm looking for the independent clause, and that is Roberta was in a position to score. I could throw a period onto that right there, and it would stand alone just fine as a sentence. It is independent. It does not require other information. I'm going back now to looking for the dependent clause, and that is, since we all pitched in to help, what happened? I have lingering questions, and therefore I know that this is a dependent clause. We'll go as soon as I'm off the phone. The independent clause here, though it may not look like it, is we'll go. It has a subject, we, and it has a verb, will go. It expresses a complete thought, and therefore it is the independent clause. Now I'm asking for you to underline the dependent clause. Because I stayed up late, I accidentally turned off the alarm clock. And my dependent clause is this right here, because I stayed up late. That depends on more information. I accidentally turned my alarm clock off, by contrast, can stand alone on its own. So that is the independent clause. Underline now the independent clause. When I hear single ladies, I dance like crazy. I can't believe that I dance like crazy. That passes the I can't believe that test. So that is my independent clause. And the last one here, the dependent clause. Even though I wish I didn't. That is not a complete thought, so it depends on more information. However, I really like the song Cheerleader. Embarrassing though it may be, that is an independent clause. It can stand by itself. At this point, please stop. Complete checkpoint 2 in Schoology. This one, like the other one, is set so that you can take it as many times as necessary before you get that perfect score. So go ahead now back into the home folder in Schoology and complete checkpoint 2.